Greetings and peace, everyone. I would like to start with Bismillah and the greeting of Nur Alaikum of the Nur Fatimiya Sufi order. And after a long-awaited break, I myself am back with my beloved friend, brother Murshid, Sheikh Wahid Azal of the Fatimiya Sufi order of part 19 in our series of dialogues and conversations. And in part 19, Sheikh Wahid will discuss the Nur Tarot and also the book of Khidr, which goes along with it. And I also encourage everyone to get the completion of the Arabic Bayan, also by Sheikh Wahid Azal. This has benefited me much in my spiritual and light journey, and I encourage all seekers of light to please get this. And it's available on Amazon, and I will put this link in the description below. And it's such a blessing to be with Sheikh Wahid Azal because we have all of these countless Sufi orders out there. And why is Sheikh Wahid and his members and his brothers and sisters of the NUR FSO seen as a threat? And that's why we must continue with our work of the NUR Fatimiya Sufi order. And I encourage you all, those that have not followed our journey, go to my YouTube channel and go to the playlist and go to the NUR FSO and watch all of the podcasts, which are also archived on Sheikh Wahid's channel. And if you're in North America and you're interested in the NUR FSO, please reach out to me and I would be more than happy to assist you. So without further ado, Bismillah and Nur alaikum to our Murshid and Sheikh.
Wa alaikum Nur and Bismillah. Let me start on some of the points that you put your finger on before. The completion of the Arabic Bayan and also the Persian Bayan is actually quite important to the work that is being built now, because a lot of the symbology in that book is going to show up in the Book of the Tree of Hermes, which could have also been named the Book of Khidr. This is the tarot system that I have been working on, putting together, going now pretty much for 20 years, except all the various elements haven't been able to come together until now, and especially after I finished the Bayan in both its Arabic and its Persian versions. Because this then kind of plays, the completion of the Bayan plays a very major role in explanation of some of the cards. For example, a card I finished only last week, Layli and Majnun, which replaces the card of the Lovers, which is the 7th card of the Major Arcana. The first gate, or the first subsection of the 13th unity of the Bayan, plays a very major role in this card because the Lovers trope, and we're taking it from a metaphysical angle, right? I explain what the metaphysics of love is in that first gate of the 13th chapter of the Bayan, the completion of the Bayan. So someone said to me, I had this conversation with someone a couple of days ago, and they said to me, I don't like the comparison, but they said you're kind of doing the same kind of stuff that Aleister Crowley was doing. Yes and no, except I'm not a Thelemite. I benefited from the writings of Aleister Crowley, and I've read a lot of his stuff, and I've actually, had his Book of Thoth with me for a long time. I kind of explain it these days as being opposition research more than anything else, and knowing the works of Aleister Crowley, because Aleister Crowley and Thelema to me represents the inverted esotericism and occultism of the West, with an imperial thrust. That's its approach to this kind of spirituality. The backdrop of it is the imperialization of spirituality, or colonization of it. Whereas what we're doing is not so much, I'm not a traditionalist either. We can't go back in time. We have to go forward in time. But in a sense, I am bringing the tarot back to what I perceive to have been its original motivation. And I got there, very interesting enough, back in the 90s and the early zeros. The late Gerald Elmore, a scholar of Ibn Arabi, who wrote and published this amazing dissertation on Ibn Arabi's Book of the Fabulous Griffin, a book that Ibn Arabi wrote in the Maghreb. Elmore argued very convincingly in a series of 4 articles that the backdrop of the tarot, that the whole basis and foundations of the tarot appears to be, from his research, in the system of Ibn Arabi himself. That somehow these ideas sort of crystallized in a system of divination that has been lost to history, but originated in North Africa, And as it made its way across the Mediterranean into southern Italy around the 13th, 14th century, it sort of took on a life of its own. I'm presently reading the first volume of Stuart Kaplan's Encyclopedia of the Tarot, and some of the historical context that he provides about the development of the cards are extremely interesting and a lot more illuminating than some of the other literature I've been reading. And without actually coming and citing the work of Elmore, because this book was, Encyclopedia of the Tarot was written in the late 70s, early 80s. Elmore wrote his pieces back in the 90s and early zeros. But these two sources actually confirm a lot of my own intuitions and also a lot of what Elmore was saying in those 4 articles that he penned for the Journal of the Muhyiddin Ibn Arabi Society. Very helpful articles. 2 of them are entitled The Fools for Love, where he basically says outright what I have now done in the NUR Tarot, that the trope of the fool, which some argue is the first card of the tarot, other people place it at the end of the tarot. Nevertheless, the fool, the journey of the fool, which is very central to the conventional Western tarot, is actually embodied in the figure of Khidr. And Elmore says this outright, and he spends 2 articles actually explaining what this all means. And this is what I have done with the first card of our tarot, which is basically known as Khidr. And I have taken the story in the Surah Al-Kahf, the Surah of the Cave, regarding Moses and Khidr, and basically created the symbolism of the first card of the NUR Tarot. And if people have seen copies of this card, whether on my Facebook or the ones I uploaded on Twitter and elsewhere, and also the first draft chapter of it, which I uploaded on my Academia EDU, this explains it, that Khidr, that this entire, the 28 cards of the major arcana, just as the conventional tarot represents the journey of the fool, in the NUR Tarot, it represents the journey of Khidr. Except I've introduced an additional layer of narrative to the received narratives about Khidr that we have in our own tradition, and that is that I have made Khidr to be the penultimate lover, the chief of what Henry Corbin would call the Fedeli di Amore, the lieges of love. So that even though the major arcana of the NUR Tarot represents the journey of Khidr, the fact that the point of the journey is actually his journey from the first card, which is actually at the point at which the story of Moses and Khidr ends, and then the rest of the cards is his journey to his beloved, which in the card is represented by the divine feminine, which we have then in the second card of the NUR Tarot, which is the Imam Creatrix. Now, one thing that I have done that I think a lot of tarot, that will pique the interest of a lot of tarotologists, is the following, is that in the tarot, and especially when they attributed the Hebrew letters to the 22 trump cards of the tarot, in my opinion, a big mistake was made when they applied the letter Bet of Hebrew to the Magus rather than the High Priestess. Aleister Crowley claims in his Book of Thought that the word Beit or Bet in its shortened form is house, and house represents the domain of the Magus. The only problem with that theory is that the word Bet in Hebrew also means girl or daughter. So it has never been explained properly why then the High Priestess was attributed to the letter Gimel, Arjin, rather than to Bet. The explanation that Crowley and the Thelemites give is that the reason why Gimel is attributed to the High Priestess is because camel, which is the word Gimel in Hebrew, represents the camel toe. So basically the female vagina is the representation. And since the Thelemic doctrine revolves around sex magic, they've taken this very crude formulation and basically applied it to the High Priestess. Whereas, in my opinion, even though that may be true, the fact of the matter is that's kind of a banalization of an esoteric symbol, in that, the katayas is only, which is the word for Greek, for female vagina, the katayas is only the portal of entry into the mysteries of the goddess in their own sex magic system. It doesn't explain the more refined or deeper elements of the metaphysics. So I have switched this around, and whereas in the conventional tarot, the third card of the tarot is usually the High Priestess, the second card of the NUR tarot is the Imam Creatrix, which replaces the Priestess, and that is attributed to the letter Ba of Arabic. And I explain in the chapter on it, what the significance, the metaphysical significance of the letter Ba is, especially in the system of Arabic Persian lettrism, or the Ilm al-Huruf, the science of the letters. I explain all of that, and how in our system, the High Priestess as the Imam Creatrix represents the same function as that very famous hadith explains about Ali, where he says, the whole of the Quran is contained in the Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Everything in the Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim is contained in the Bismillah, and everything in the Bismillah is contained within the Ba and ayan, the dot beneath the letter Ba. And in the card, you see this represented by our artists, where you have a inverted Ba with its dot or nuqta being represented by a cypress tree, which is a very significant plant symbolism. Cypress trees have always kind of been associated in one form or another with the goddess herself. And so the goddess, aka the Imam Creatrix in this deck, is the dot beneath the letter Ba, which incidentally in ancient Hebrew Israelite religion, before whoever wrote the book of Deuteronomy, which was obviously not Moses, the ancient Israelites actually worshipped Yahweh at trees, and they called this the Asherah, and the Asherah was feminine, and one can speculate that perhaps they were trying to mimic or recreate, or were otherwise trying to do the same, recreate the experience of Moses at the burning bush, but they would approach trees, and just like a lot of the goddess worshippers of India, especially the Tantrikas, they worship at trees. The ancient Israelites were worshiping at trees. This was prescribed by whoever was the dominant party that got rid of all these practices and patriarchalized Judaism, or the ancient Israelite religion, beyond what it had been. But nevertheless, this cypress tree in that card also represents the Asherah, which in contemporary Kabbalistic speculation, Asherah is the material epiphany of the Shekinah, which is the feminine manifestation of the Godhead in the Kabbalah. So all of these are being incorporated into this deck. I have, like I said, I might not owe much in terms of my own perspective of origin on Aleister Crowley, but nevertheless, there are many points that I argue with him, and I footnote a lot of these in these various chapters. Basically, from people I have shown this, the chapters through so far that I've written, they all agree that what I am doing here is going beyond the tarot. Yes, it is a system of tarot, but I'm taking also the question of divination back to its original meaning. And the original meaning of divination is basically to divine with the powers, or the gods in the ancient context, or the spirit, unitary spirit in our context. So as we move out of the major arcana, the 28 major arcana cards of the NUR tarot, all of which represent the 28 letters of the Arabic alphabet in their letters trajectory from Aleph to Ain. And also then these letters are then corresponded to the 28 lunar mansions. But the 28 lunar mansions are basically configured on the basis of the NUR calendar of 13 months and 28 days. So based on my own observations and based on my own tweaking over these last 20 years, I have changed actually the degree of the lunar mansions by a degree, which is then basically put each lunar mansion within a 13-degree unfolding within the month that ends perfectly in the final one with the final one at Pisces, and the 13 degrees between that and the 0.0 degree of Aries. So all of this is all plagued. These are the 28 cards of the major arcana. So far, I've only been writing or put together 7 of these cards. So the last one was the Layli and Majnun, which replaces the lovers. The next one that I'll be writing and hopefully finishing in the next couple of days will be the card of Zulfiqar, which replaces the Chariot card. But as we move away from the major arcana, we have a middle arcana and then a minor arcana. Now let me address what the middle arcana represents. Anyone who has worked with the tarot or has read the tarot literature knows the court cards. So the court cards that we have 16 court cards associated with the 4 suits of the minor arcana. So let's say Pentacles. So you have the Knight of Pentacles, Princess of Pentacles, the King, and then the Queen of Pentacles. There are 4 of these associated then to 10 cards of the minor arcana in the conventional tarot. This configuration has never made any sense to me for a very simple reason, is that the court cards, even though they give a lot of information in various divinations and readings, nevertheless, they seem to be somewhere in between being major arcana cards, right? But without really explaining why they are put in a trajectory of 10 cards, which are supposed to represent the 10 Sephirot of the Kabbalistic tree of life in their 10 Sephirotic trajectory. No one has ever explained this. The emergence of the court cards, from what I'm reading from Stuart Kaplan, seems to have been a very arbitrary creation, sometime probably around the 18th century. And it was only later with not so much Eliphas Levi, but the Golden Dawn and others who then began to superimpose arbitrary interpretations on what these court cards represent. The reason for 4 of them appearing, the standard explanation is that they represent the 4 worlds within the Kabbalistic tree of life. So Atzilut, Briah, Yetzirah, and Asiya, the 4 worlds within the tree. But the question has never been answered that if they are part of a air, fire, water, and earth trajectory, why are they appearing twice within the minor arcana, which each of these suits are already representing these elements? So what I have done is I have basically taken the court cards out of the minor arcana completely. Rather than having 4, what I've done is there are 8 cards in total to the middle arcana, which I've introduced, which is half of the 16 that occurs in the court cards, and basically created this middle arcana as kind of the isthmus, or the kind of the middle ground between the major and the minor. And these 8 cards of the middle arcana will function in a similar fashion to the court cards of the minor arcana in the conventional tarot, and will be giving the same kind of information as these court cards did in the conventional tarot. Then we move into the minor arcana. The minor arcana is divided by 4 suits, and in the order of air, fire, water, and earth. So the very first card of the minor arcana is called the Heir of the One. And so the names of the NUR months in English will basically qualify the characteristic of the cards, and then where they occur in their air, fire, water, and earth between the 4 suits of the minor arcana. Now, each of these 13 cards in their, whether in their air, fire, water, and earth cards, are then associated with 7 divine names. Okay? So, for example, let's say the first card, which is the Heir of the One. First card, the very first name of the 385 supreme names is Hua, right? So if that card comes up, there are 7 names, with the first one being Hua. So 7 names then act as the basically the information that will be given to a diviner as to what the reading is supposed to be. So the names of God, right, now play as the information, as the matrix of divination, together with the elements, air, fire, water, and earth, and also where particular days occur, whether on a normal astrological configuration or on a in their lunar mansions, or by the planetary hours as well. All of this together will then offer the information in a given reading or a given nation. I've lost your voice, by the way.
Do you hear me now?
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, I think Sheikh, this is fascinating because what we see in the Western occult system or in the Western spiritual system is basically everything has been whitewashed. Even the
Sure.
translation of Rumi, how they removed all of the references of Islam, of Allah, of God, anything that relates to this path of tasawwuf or Sufism. It was all whitewashed to make Rumi seem like a romantic poet. But it's something that you have addressed in the past, that this was not the case, and now we see the same, whether it's the Masonic school system or other school systems. A lot of it comes from the East, but the Western system of the ivory towers does not give it its due credit. Same thing with Ibn Arabi and the divination system, and I'm so grateful that you are the person that he who God shall make manifest, who is doing all of this justice and making sure that the proper knowledge of the ancient Persians and those of the East are being given credit for their contributions to humanity. And I'm truly honored to walk this path with you and the good work that you're doing.
Honor is mine. Honor is mine. The honor belongs to all of us. So this is what's going on. Now, you asked earlier, why is there opposition? Well, obviously there's opposition because, number one, there's quite a big claim that is being made here. And also potentially a system such as this has the potential of, basically relegating everything else into the margins, right? And particularly if it works, which it has been for me, because I've been dealing with this system and refining it. It's been my alchemical work, as it were, and it works. So it allows proper communication with the spirit. There are a lot of tarot readers. There's good ones, but there's a lot of bad ones. There's a lot of people that just make it up and made a whole career out of basically performing.
Yes.
Right? And the times that we're moving into requires a completely different approach. That the spirit work is the spirit work, and you either enter it fully and do it properly with integrity or get lost. That is the message. So, when a system such as capitalism and the mindset attached to it, which is a inverted civilizational mentality, confronts something like that, its representatives, even amongst people who may not even be conscious, but who are plugged into the greater egregore of what this thing is, are going to react negatively. It's very natural, very self-explanatory. It doesn't make a difference, what your education level is or what your background is. If you are unconscious of the greater forces that are playing you, right, then you're going to react to something like that. And I've seen this a lot with a lot of Thelemites, even though some of them claim to be, deep spirit workers. I've met some extremely good ones, who are close friends of mine. And these people might as well be, initiates of real initiatic traditions and not Thelemites. But that's neither here nor there. So it's really about how consciously you are walking the path that you profess to. And it really doesn't matter what packaging this comes in, because ultimately when we move into the spirit world itself, it is beyond our human languaging, or beyond the cultural context, the languages, all of this is beyond it. Once you enter that domain, you will see it for yourself. Nevertheless, it still communicates to those who reach out to it through the prism of its language, or the language of the people of that culture, the context, etc. We have now moved into an age where the Arabic language is being taken more seriously. Islam is being taken more seriously, even though we still haven't moved in the mainstream popular culture into the more esoteric and deeper and philosophical levels of a 1400-year civilization. Nevertheless, we are moving into a place where all these things are becoming relevant. More and more people are moving into Islamic studies. A lot of people are converting as a result of their interest or encounter with this sort of material, whether it be Rumi, Ibn Arabi, whatever, and are finding this stuff very fascinating. So I look at this as a sort of a an age where a sort of a melting pot is happening.
Yeah.
Now, this can be taken in many different directions. It could be taken in a very banal, capitalist, very surface and without any depth kind of direction that we see, for example, in the Gulf countries or with the Saudis or, just the popular culture. Or it can be taken into a much deeper, esoteric, authentic, and vertical direction to the spirit, to allow people, to have that kind of, contact, their own personal contact with the spirit world itself. And this is where the Quran is extremely important. And I don't understand why a lot of Muslims forget this. One of the main arguments that the Quran is arguing against on a continual basis is the notion of inherited religion. If you go and read the story of Abraham and his father, this was the confrontation between Abraham, the son, with his father, who was the idolater. And when Abraham's mission begins, and he preaches, and he tells his people that they need to worship the one God, the response of Abraham's father is, but why should we abandon our old gods? Our forefathers have worshipped the same God. Why should we come into Tawheed? And this is a punctuated point throughout the Quran that you cannot inherit your religion. You cannot even inherit your Islam, right? Each person must come to the Tawheed on their own. Doesn't matter even if your parents or your father, your grandfather was a great imam or ayatollah or scholar or mystic, whatever. You cannot inherit this. You have to, at each moment, answer the call of Alastu bi Rabbikum, am I not your Lord? You have to do it, not your parents for you. And this is where I think, because the culture itself, the greater culture, Muslim culture, has even forgotten this, or they don't study the Quran carefully enough, they have gone into this path of being, using Islam as an identity that they've inherited from their families or whatever. This is not the path of Tawheed, right? But true things such as the NUR tarot that I'm developing and others that others will develop, because the Quran plays a very central role in this tarot that I've made. And the esoteric exegesis or aesegesis interpretation of the Quran is very central. Its symbolism, its numerologies, the connection between its symbolism and its tropes play a very central role in this deck. And even though I'm also and the artist as well, we are basically pummeling the depths of the symbolism of the pre-Islamic past of the cultures of Mesopotamia, such as the Sumerians, Akkadians, etc. All of the symbology is very central to this. Nevertheless, all of these are then kind of, in a sense, appropriated for a greater, what I have dubbed the Harmonia Paganorum Abrahamica, such that even the symbology of the pre-Islamic pagan universe of Mesopotamia and ancient Egypt plays a very central role in giving us an appreciation of Tawheed. I have a very different perspective from a lot of Muslims as to what the conflict between the early Muslims and the Quraysh and the idolaters of Mecca and Medina is about. My reading of this story, number one, is that much of the Quraysh, and especially the ruling classes of Mecca at the time, weren't really even believers in their own deities, that they had found a lucrative business and they were lining their pockets, and that someone like Muhammad that shows up amongst them, yes, he is preaching the metaphysical Tawheed, but more importantly, on the social level, he is also preaching a Tawheed within society, or what Ali Shariati dubbed the Tawheed Ijtima'i, the social Tawheed, which a society like Mecca, classist or caste-ridden, was then lining its pockets with all these deities and all these idols in the Kaaba that it doesn't really even believe in itself, but it's its business, it's its living, very much speaks to even the time that we are living in today, at this time, where all these various religions and ideologies, even Muslim figures and Islamic groups who don't really believe what they say, but it's their business and it's their wealth and their means to income, And so they've made a plaything of the spirit. And it, from my point of view, and from the point of view of the spirit itself, which is everything, it really doesn't care in what modality, right, individuals seek to approach it, so long as it's done with integrity, absolute, unimpeachable integrity. When that integrity falls, we have seen this throughout history, when the integrity of various people falls, that is when the spirit makes its appearance. And it's done that even within pagan societies who have kind of strayed from their own ethical codes. And it's appeared to either set them back on a path that they need to be on, or it has just completely demolished that context because it's become so toxic that it doesn't even work in any context, so it has to introduce something new. This is the world we're living in today. This is also, in my opinion, what the meaning of Mahdawiya or Messianic or introducing the whole Mahdi trope of Islam is really all about. And you read it in the Hadith, and you read it in a lot of the narratives that have reached us, that this sort of event occurs when a given society finds itself in a very similar place as the Quraysh found themselves right at the beginning of the call of Islam itself. But except this time we're encountering this on a global level. So we are living, in a sense, in a Jahiliyyah that is global, right?
Definitely.
And that even a lot of the Muslimun themselves are participant in this Jahiliyyah. Just as at the time of the Prophet, you had a lot of Christians and a lot of Jews and a lot of, what the Quran calls the people of the Din al-Hanif, or Hunafa, who had also fallen away from the path, from the original path. And so it was this path that Muhammad then reconfigured, right, on a spatio-temporal, horizontal level of history into what we have today as Islam, right? But even this has kind of gone off the deep end. So we are living, in a sense, in that same situation today that we found in the 6th century Common Era with the emergence of Islam itself. And this is what, in my opinion, and from my readings and meditations for 20, 30 years now on these traditions, this is what it's trying to convey. And in the Shiite Hadith, especially, there are key points that a lot of Shiites even miss oftentimes. Because there's a doctrine that we have called Bada. And Bada means not Bida, but Bada. Bada denotes the alteration of the divine plan, right? Bada, and Imam Jafar as-Sadiq alayhi salam says, God is not worshipped in any format other than, higher than Bada, to acknowledge that the divine, can do whatever it wants. That even traditions and prophecies do not bind the All-High, right? And that a lot of times the traditions and prophecies, yes, they can act as guides, but simultaneously, if people cling to the literal element of these traditions and prophecies, they become veils. And for those who are seeking the Mahdi, or those who are seeking the Imam of the age, if you are clinging to the signs of the appearance, you're veiled by the signs, and are not seeking the Mahdi himself or herself. You're seeking the sign. The signs have veiled you. And these are tests that the All-High has always put in front of everybody throughout every dispensation, and it continues to do that even today. And this goes back to the issue of the inherited religion, yes, that you have to be a seeker, and that is why being a salik, a wayfarer on this path, whatever your whatever denomination you identify yourself as, is what the Quran and what the All-High, throughout all the traditions, has always called the people to be a seeker of it, not a emulator of an identity. I am a Sunni Muslim, a Shia Muslim, a Ibadi Muslim. I belong to the Chishtiya Tariqa or the Qadari Tariqa or even the Fatimiya Tariqa or whatever Tariqa. You have to be a seeker. So one of the motivations of this tarot is essentially to basically codify the suluk, the search for God, in a system of divination with the names, the very keys to which the Godhead is ultimately sought and found in the Sufi in the Sufi system is through the practice with the names of God and the realizations that these names, which are basically relations, because the names both guide to the one and also veil from the one simultaneously. But it is understanding this paradox and working with this paradox on a daily basis that ultimately gets you to that vision and that connection and that wasl, that connectivity between you and the spirit. So this is what the NUR Tarot is seeking to do within the system that I have created for the FSO, including our version of the tree, which is 13 spheres and 36 paths within it, rather than the 10 spheres and 22. So all of this has come together. I expect probably it will take me another 6-7 months to basically put the finishing touches to the major arcana for my writing, explanatory writings on the major arcana. Then I will write up based on my notes the middle arcana, and then finally moving to the minor arcana. All of these already exist in notes, which is running upwards of about 20,000 pages of electronics notes at the moment. So I'm basically having to condense everything, refine everything, and then find my citations, etc. So it's both a scholarly endeavor as well as a visionary endeavor. So at the tail end of this process, when this is all put together as the Book of the Tree of Hermes and then the NUR Tarot properly, I will be offering a completely unique system for people who then can also not only use it for divination, in doing readings for other people, fortune telling, but also as a kind of a meditative mandala for themselves. So these tarot cards will come actually with a divination table, a kind of a white silken cloth with images that are engrafted in the middle of it, and it's on this table cloth that the divination is actually made. So this will be a suluk. So this is my gift to, first of all, the FSO itself, and also then to the wider community who are interested in this stuff, to maybe look at this system and look at the tarot in this kind of a trajectory as kind of a path to follow towards precisely the very thing that everybody seeks. Because from the perspective of Sufi metaphysics, the whole plane and trajectory of the world and history, all of it, are manifestations and the self-disclosures of the names of God, right? The Godhead is transcendent. The principle that is behind all of this stuff is transcendent. So there is an ontological distance between, the creator and the created. Nevertheless, there's no vacuum, because the self-revelation of the one produces this plane of relations. And and this is from the Sufi metaphysical perspective. These are the names and attributes. And in the FSO, we have 385 names, 385 being the precise gematria of the Shekinah in Hebrew. And when these are put together within and basically corresponded and associated to days, and then days to elements, and elements to worlds, and then a few other things, this then gives a very powerful roadmap. And let us emphasize, it's a roadmap, because you still have to walk the path, for people to find themselves back to their spirit, and whatever name denotation, whatever it is that they understand this concept by.
Sheikh, that's absolutely interesting and beautiful, because one of the 99 names of Muhammad, peace be upon him, is Bayan. And Bayan meaning the obvious words. And every century, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends a reformer for Islam. And I believe you are one of those reformers in my heart, mind, body, and soul. I truly do so. And when I went to Pakistan, you are right. Majority of the people we are seeing, even in the Muslim world, they're all people who have inherited Islam, and they are just following it because it was just given to them as a cultural identity. That's something that they don't really truly appreciate. It's esoteric and occult knowledge, where you have Islam is telling you to be a wayfarer or a traveling man, and to come to it with your own free will and accord. And we see that resembled in the Masonic initiatic system and other initiatic systems. So a lot of this influence that the Sufis influenced, whether it was the Knights Templar or Christian Rosencreutz, or when they were in Spain, bringing the Europeans from the darkness to light when it was being suppressed by the Roman Catholics. So Islam, in its original identity, it's truly something to be appreciated in an initiatic system. It's like even what Sheikh Abdul Qadir Jilani did, who was
Yeah.
the great Persian saint, and
Mm.
he brought people back to that original Islam, saying that it's instead of being in identities, you must be a believer and have an application phase of that knowledge rather than just say I'm a Muslim. And majority we see are not representing Islam, and they are still following those cultural practices which predate Islam. And this is what I truly appreciate on what I've learned from the Arabic Bayan thus far, where Sheikh Wahid Azal is teaching us that find a path or any path instead of falling into these identities of Sunni, Shia, and the whataboutisms. Instead of being divided, come together as mankind. As it
Yeah.
says in the Quran, Surah 2, verse 62, that it's not about what path you follow. As long as you're a good human being and do the right thing, then God shall have no punishment
But
or
that
grief
is the
for you.
path. That is the path. This is the thing. That is the path.
Yep.
That is precisely the path. And see, identity has its uses. It is, as long as you can use it in an alchemical way. I'm not saying discard it, because in this spatial temporal world, everything is contextually based, right? Our understanding, how we project meaning onto things, how we then reach a goal based on the meanings that we project, whatnot. So everything is context based. This is the nature of the dualism of this level. But rather than it being a hindrance, and this is where I very fundamentally disagree with a lot of Gnostics, capital G. Duality serves a purpose, right? Because let's face it, and a lot of the Sufis have explained this very beautifully, right? The one cannot know itself outside of duality. This might sound very heretical idea. Now, this is a context-based statement, so don't take it as a totalizing statement. I'm not making an absolute statement. I'm making a very relative contextual statement. But when you look at this from a symbolic point of view, it's absolutely beautiful, right? Especially when we look at that hadith of the hidden treasure. I was a hidden treasure. I desired to be known. Therefore, I created creation in order to be known, right? Right there, the hidden treasure saying that it itself desired the creation of duality. Why? In order to know itself through the infinite projections of its own self, which is everything, and even in the contraries, right? And Rumi says this in a poem in his Masnavi. He says, "Chun bi rangi asir rang shud, Musa ba Isa andar jang shud." When colorlessness became the captive of color, and Moses went to war with Jesus. Now, colorlessness and color, both of them are very powerful symbolism, right? One is liquid water, right? It can take on any color. But then color itself is the rainbow. So the rainbow, once the colorlessness become the color, the divergences in the colors in themselves, which are already one, produce the dualism of self and other, or conflict, or whatever. So in one sense, the conflict is necessary, in a sense, in this realm, with all its heartbreak and all of its, angst. And I'm the first one to say that it sucks, because it does. But nevertheless, there is a cosmic or a metaphysical economy in place here in this world. And it is for those who aspire to the path of the Magus, right, the path of theurgy, until that is resolved within the emotions and the feelings in the heart of each individual Magus, they don't have access to the power. When you understand this paradox and literally move into it in whatever form it is, only then you will be given the power. This was the same with myself. I struggled with this. Okay, these are great ideas that I'm reading in these books. Why can't I not see it? And so my own Murshid smiled. He said, practice with the zikr, and there's nothing more I can tell you. The more you practice with the zikr and the deeper you go with the zikr, that is when you start to get why this is the case, right? And it did, and especially after he passed away, and the final instructions that I got from him about visualizing the greatest name and working with whatever this greatest name inspired me with. So I went through the trajectory of every single name. I was working at one point exclusively with the Dua Joshan, which has 1,001 names in it. Then the Bab's names of all things, and on and on and on, and also names and words of power from other traditions and whatnot. And all of these, opened up more and more and more and more layers of the mystery, of the onion of the greater mystery. That doesn't say, and this is where even Arabi is so helpful, that doesn't say that we throw our arms up and go sit in the corner and just say it's all one and we don't have to do anything. No, because there is an economy in place. You still have to do a cosmic metaphysical economy. You still have to play your role in this. You can't basically, run away from the fight or run away from the act of the theater. If you're a protagonist in the play, and you can't just say, okay, I'm going home now. The play doesn't happen. That is what this is all about. So realizing that even the terms oneness are misleading. I mean, people are used and bandying about that because everybody thinks of a numerical oneness, right? The Bayan has a very interesting way of basically critiquing this. The Bab introduces this in his own part of the Bayan that he's written. He calls it Wahid bila adad, the one without number, right? So when you can, it's not something that one can easily conceptualize. The concept of the one that is outside of numerics, that you cannot quantifiably enumerate. It's one of those things that you have to sit down and meditate on, and you never quite get it because every time you try to grasp of a concept of a one without number, you're still projecting quantifiable categories in your own mind to try to understand this, and that's impossible to do. Nevertheless, the very saluk, the very wayfaring into the understanding of what this notion means itself, then just opens more and more and more and more things to you.
That is true, Sheikh. Absolutely. And it's interesting because there was a 33rd degree Mason one time. He told me that God holds you in the palm of his hands. And in Surah Al-Ikhlas, even if we look at God being described as this perfect infinite reality that neither begets nor is begotten, and it tells you that this God, or the God, the God of all gods, is beyond all description. And that is the beauty of what you're describing, is that in the Western system, when they tell you about the oneness and about love and light, they also have to realize this duality of both sides that we have to deal with. It's not always a good time. And if you have a role that God has prepared for you, you must be able to accept it and prepare for it and fight for it and go through your role and the destiny that has been written for you. So it's like with Sheikh Abdul Qadir Jilani when he went to Baghdad. Khidr appeared, and Khidr told him, "You're not ready yet." So he had to wander the deserts for years and years, and then when he was ready, Sheikh Abdul Qadir Jilani, the great Persian saint, was able to take his role and be the great reformer of Islam that we know as today. So we have to go through our trials and tribulations. We have to do the zikrs that our murshids are giving us. We have to do the inner work. We have to do the necessary prayers and practices. And I will testify myself that with the NUR FSO teachings and practices and the light and gaze of Sheikh Wahid Azal in my life, it has made a huge difference in my life from all of the paths that I walked. And this cannot be stressed. If you're going to walk this path, you must first take responsibility and you must do the work. There are many I see in the Western spiritual community or the love and light community that they use these concepts of oneness, love, and light to avoid accountability for their actions also.
Yeah, absolutely. And this comes with basically the cultural egregore that this new age is attached to. Someone said it, and I love this, the way they put it, because I've been using it ever since. They said that the new age is basically a secular religion for middle-class white people.
Right? That's right.
Right. So, and secular middle-class white people only look at the world through quantifiable lenses, and they don't want the responsibility that goes with it. And the religious universe, especially in its ethical matrix is trying to put accountability on every single thing you do. Even, every thought that goes through your head, you're accountable for, right? But once you secularize that universe, you're not accountable to anything, even though a lot of these people are constantly talking the talk of karma and all of this, but yet when push comes to crunch, they don't want the responsibility to go with it. So this was beautiful, the New Age is the secularized religion of middle-class white people.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, because what we see here and what I've seen in these different initiatic paths, Sheikh, whether it's Rosicrucianism, and people don't give it enough credit that Christian Rosenkreutz was taught by the Sufis, and he took that knowledge back to the Europeans, the Knights Templar, and with the Masonic Foundation. I've extensively covered that, and I've opened a lot of eyes of many Masons in the West who never knew of these parallel comparisons and realities. And we have all of these other things, like even with the Kabbalah, how in our one of our previous episodes you had covered that with Ibn Arabi with the divination. So there's so many things that the Western ivory towers are not giving due credit to the systems of the East and those ancient civilizations, the Persians and the Sumerians, who are already doing all of this stuff.
To their credit, the university system, to its credit, is doing some work, but let's be clear about what they're not doing. What they're doing is, like most systems in the past that monopolize knowledge, right? The university ivory tower system in the West is doing exactly the same thing. They are monopolizing knowledge, but they're operating within a secular context, right? So even though they're producing infinite, very well written studies and analysis and taxonomization and whatnot, but the people who are working on this material don't seem to believe in what they're doing. And in the West, given the academic epistemology that prevails, that is very much Kantian or post-Kantian, they believe that this is actually an important thing, that in order to be objective, you should not be a participant in the very world that you're a part of. And if you have a removed distance from your topic, then you have a much bigger panoramic perspective. Well, even from a methodological point of view and a point of view of theory, one of the good things about postmodernism, probably I would leave it there, but is that it has proven this approach to be flawed. That it's not true that if you have a distance or are removed from your subject, that necessarily makes you privy to a deeper understanding or a wider perspective on the topic that you're covering. That is not necessarily true at all. In fact, insiders' perspective have a lens into the understanding of a certain perspective that one that is removed from it doesn't have. Because a thing in itself is not just its outward appearance. There's a whole inner world of emotions that then give informations around certain things. Like, for example, someone who is not a Muslim, who has never participated, for example, let's say in the Jummah, right? Who has never heard the Arabic of the Quran chanted, right? How could they become an expert on the topic merely by having read, let's say, 500 sources on this subject? They may have an intellectual, mental understanding, right? But they don't have an understanding on the very phenomena, the phenomenology of that topic. So it would behoove them, even from the point of view of doing field work like an anthropologist, to then enter into the domain of the mosque and the congregation and spend some time assaying and assessing the very topic that they're supposedly an expert in. So in a sense, even Western anthropology as a method has proven that the method of this whole distant observer as objective is false, that it doesn't necessarily give this picture. So whereas previously, and I would say probably up until about 20, 30 years ago, an insider in a given religious tradition was always kind of treated with kid gloves in a field like comparative religion, or even like a field like Islamic studies. Now there's more of a generation coming who are actual Muslims, they're participant in the tradition, and these people are the ones that are coming up in the academy. This is actually a very positive development. My only concern is that these people should also be very conscious that there is a dynamic within that institution that is trying to pull them away from that, right? So they have to be very on their guard in order to maintain their inner integrity in this process, with all the biases and the philosophical and theoretical edifice that is around the university system in the West. And eventually, my hope is that there will be a sort of a alchemical transformation from within, that we don't get one that is biased ideologically in one, on one level or the other, because the problem, especially in the area disciplines of the ivory tower, one of the problems that they have is that because of the secularization of all knowledge, right, what they're treating objects of knowledge as are like museum items, so that then the scholar becomes nothing more than a curator of ideas, as if these things are dead. And this in itself is not only dangerous, but it lacks any integrity. I've had this conversation with a lot of different academics, and we've circled many different perspectives on this, and they've all kind of reached the conclusion that, yeah, you're right, this is what is happening, and it creates a greater problem. And the greater problem is that, for example, certain topics don't get discussed, and during this time of pushing political correctness to the point of that it has come to the other side of it, because political correctness was supposed to rectify a problem. Now it's created another problem in itself, right? So in this age, with certain people and certain institutional biases, we're having a situation that another layer of secularized ideology has been put on the ivory tower, and it's impeding the growth of knowledge. So people who should be, for example, writing about certain topics are not, because why? These topics are controversial. A good example in the United States that happened last year was that an art historian did a class on Islamic art, and he even she told her class that she was going to show some of the Islamic era depictions of the Prophet. This class had a class full of Salafi or Wahhabi oriented students who had a complete cow, went and complained against their teacher, this instructor, lecturer. She was fired from her job, even though the class is Islamic art history, and she gave advanced warning that there have been depictions of the Prophet within Islamic civilization itself. Nevertheless, the university administration, rather than hearing this, the greater argument and the facts, fired this woman, tenured professor. And we're finding a lot of these, so that even liberalism is now, in a very weird way, as we saw during the Trump era, giving way to reactionary and right-wing positions from the point of view of not wanting to offend. Offense, in my opinion, is not a problem. In fact, offense serves an alchemical purpose in the greater plane of society, especially if the offense is warranted. If something is not on the Sirat al-Mustaqim, if there's deception, if there's something that is incorrect, or there's an error, to not point this out, or not to shed knowledge on not to on a facet of something, is a crime. But the banalization and the over-secularization of ideology that we find in the university system in the West right now has moved into this direction. So then you have to ask the question, then what is the purpose of these institutions? Because these institutions are becoming politicized. They're no longer dispassionate, objective, loci of research and knowledge. They've become nothing more than an extension of the problems of the wider society. And then when you look at, for example, the area disciplines where most tenured academics right now are basically chasing after funding and money, right? And how neoliberalism and these foundations and whatnot, the tentacles of the neoliberal system find their way into the university system through these means, that then control the agenda of research. You see that this entire system is falling apart.
That is true, Sheikh. And what's going on is, in this day and age of the internet and how everything, we have like a social media generation and internet generation, and there's an abundance of knowledge, and so much abundance of knowledge that they can learn at their own free will and accord. And that's what these higher institutions are supposed to promote: free thinking, free education, to connect to a higher sense of being. And I'm seeing that in when I visited Pakistan as well, that these students, these new generations that are growing up, they're not following into that paradigm of being divided by denomination or a caste system or a last name. Cousin marriages are being less and less. People are
Good.
interacting. They're
Good.
not caring about Sunni Shia issues anymore. They're coming together as good human beings trying to help each other. And we're seeing that more and more in the West as well, that the old racist values that they had inherited, the kids that are growing up today, they are going to change that. And even the college and university system, they're getting desperate now to get students, because they're like, why am I going to pay all this astronomical amount of money and get in debt? And at the end, I'm in a position where without a reference, I cannot even get a job.
And
So,
and in the social science humanities, this is the real conundrum: is that most people, I mean, forget about a bachelor's degree. With a bachelor's degree, you can't do anything anymore. But even people who have master's degrees or MPhils or doctorates, full doctorates, can't seem to get work. So this has put then more pressure on these disciplines, to kind of solidify their positions. We had a case here in Australia. I was still in the United States at the time it happened. This was during the late 90s, where when the Tory government of the time came in, this was around 1996, it's one of its very first acts, without any forewarning, it eliminated all federal funding to a Department of Classics at, I think it was at Macquarie University in Victoria. So overnight, you had this entire department of tenured academics who had no work. Their department ceased to exist. Why? Because the federal government of this country, then packed with conservatives, decided that classics was not a subject that the federal government of this country should fund. Now they've reached a point that they're kind of kicking themselves, because the elimination of classics from a school such as Macquarie University then opened for area disciplines and funding from overseas and private foundations. And so now the right feels threatened, because after they themselves got the classics, right? Western civilization, of which the classics is the epitome, was sidelined. So now they're trying to respawn what they call departments or area disciplines of Western studies and classics and that sort of thing, even though they themselves were responsible for creating the problem in the first place.
yeah, that's absolutely right. And I believe as time goes on, Sheikh, what we're seeing not only in the U.S. but over in my country and even in Iran, with women now taking back their freedom, with the women life and freedom, and right, we're gonna see that change within our lifetime, and we are part of that pivotal role that we're playing as protagonists of the God that is using us to do this great work, to awaken humanity, to spread this love and light, and to tell people to do the right thing. Even now in America, it's going to be so many people that will play a pivotal role, because those with the 2016 mentality are trying to make a comeback in 2024. So it's going to be a critical time for the rest of this year and 2024 ahead, for the new generation that has risen up in this country to battle against that old racist system, to not let that form of supremacy come back. So there's still a lot of fight ahead of us, whether it's in America, in Australia,
It's a
in
lot
Iran,
of
in
big
Pakistan,
fight.
and everywhere.
Big fight. Right now, one of the fights that we have here in Australia is that the Labour government that came in last year, as part of their platform, which to their credit, they're trying to implement. They're trying to put a referendum in this country to give the Aboriginal people a voice within the parliament and the political system. It's called the Voice. And even though the past conservative Tory government of this country, in words, said they would support it, as this thing is gaining momentum, and as the current government announced that they were going to, basically talk about having a referendum at the end of this year, the conservative opposition now under this complete racist idiot leader by the name of Peter Dutton, are going to oppose it through thick and thin. And just remember that this Australia is a settler colony.
Yeah.
This referendum of giving these people the voice, enshrining a role for them within the constitution of the country, is at least designed, even if it's on a minimal level, to rectify this problem of marginalizing them for the last 250 years. But the white colonial settler racist mentality that is enshrined in these conservatives through thick and thin wants to prevent this from happening. We think the referendum will succeed, but once these people have come out in vocal opposition to it, it's going to be that much more difficult. And if it fails, then Australia will basically paint itself as yet again as a white colonial settler backwater that most of the world currently looks at it as.
Sheikh, that's interesting because speaking of these settler regimes, what do you think of the Vatican recently revoking the doctrine of discovery, which had taken over all of these indigenous lands, whether it's America, Australia, New Zealand, slaughtered the natives and took over the land for white settler regimes? So what do you think of the Vatican, the one who actually put this out there, now revoking it?
To its credit, on the surface, the current Pope who pushed through this, all kudos for doing so, but it's a little, it's a little too late. But nevertheless, the intention is good, so we praise the intention behind it. Another reason is the following. The Catholic Church, from what I understand, over the last 50 years has lost a lot of flock, right? And a lot of its flock has lost because of its regressive and reactionary policies, like its position on against abortion, etc. This has been a thorn in its side for a very long time. It apologized for the Spanish Inquisition. It kind of tentatively apologized for its role during the Holocaust and its collaboration with the Nazis, but it dragged its feet until the current Pope on an issue that preceded all of these, or was contemporaneous with the Inquisition, and that was the doctrine of discovery that the Church itself created as a carte blanche during the late 15th century, as Columbus was coming to the Americas to conquer the Americas. And so 500 something odd years from this time, in a doctrine that it itself fabricated, that served as the basis, the religious basis of European racism, that it's reversing now is a very good thing. But, from one level, I think that it is also a cry of weakness by the institution of the Church, because they're losing people.
Yes, that's definitely right. And it's just like how we're seeing this change in our generation, of how we're going to see this in our lifetime, of these changes taking place, whether it's the Vatican revoking their old policies, which caused a lot of damage to the world, or whether it's the young generations, regardless of their race, religion, or country, that are rising up and shattering the old mentalities and old programming, which set people apart. Now, I believe as time goes on, it's like even what your traditional Islam says, to become Ummati Muhammad, to become the community of Muhammad, that everyone is one together as brothers and sisters, regardless of wherever you come from. And together we must become one community to help each other. And I believe that vision of the NUR FSO will take fruition in our lifetime, where we will see that the sale of the elements of air, fire, earth, water will be prohibited, and everyone will have equal access to all things that they deserve to be able to get their God-given human rights and to have a peaceful world, which God will give us. And through not only the great sacrifice and efforts that you have made in your life, but all of us together that are on this path that will continue to walk with you and beside you to achieve this reality. So to conclude this part 19, please, your closing thoughts on the Khidr and the tarot.
What can I say? There's so much to be said. I would just say that people are welcome to ask me questions about this. I will strive to get this done within the next year. There's a lot of work to be done on it. I'm also learning in the process, even though, like I said, I've accumulated about 20,000 pages of electronic notes so far. But each day it surprises me, and the way that it communicates with me already before we've even got the physical cards out, that this is going to be something else.
Yes.
Anybody who wants to help with putting the book together, I am asking for that because my what I can actually put of graphics and charts and that sort of thing is very limited with the programming I have. If anybody wants to step out and help there, I would probably need their help in the next 6 months at some point.
Please tell the viewers how they can contact you.
You can contact me via Salman if you're in the United States. You can contact me on my Facebook. I'm very public. I have a Twitter account. I have a blog that gives my email address, and so you are, welcome to contact me through any of these. I will be very busy, at least in putting this together, because I want this at the latest to be all out and done and finished and at the printer and produced by sometime in the middle of 2025 at the very latest.
This is truly revolutionary, Sheikh, because I have not seen any Sufi order basically do this tarot system and to basically have this form of divination, which has to be out there. And I think you're doing great work, and I encourage everyone, please, if you're in the US and you would like to join the NUR FSO, please get in touch with me, or if you would like to get in touch with Sheikh Wahid Azal, and I will put all of the links of his description below. And I encourage you all to also get the Arabic Bayan, which I will also post the link in the description.
I should thank here, all kudos and thanks to the artist of our major arcana, Habib Shahbazi, who has done an absolutely amazing job of these. He has exceeded my expectations. Originally, the artist of these cards was supposed to be Roya, but the Al-Haya had other plans. With Habib, this has exceeded my expectations. I gave him very minimal information on each of the cards because my own views on each of these cards of the major arcana was very sketchy. But he has plugged into this spirit, and she has just downloaded information with each one that he has put out. It just from one to the next, it has been amazing. So all kudos to Habib. He is just an amazing visionary artist of the time. And I believe that once these cards are out, that Habib's name as a visionary artist will go way beyond even Lady Frida Harris, who did the Thoth cards for Crowley.
Definitely, Sheikh. Definitely. This has truly been an educational experience for me, enlightening as always, to be your murid and to learn from you. And this concludes part 19 for those that are watching. And I encourage you all to follow our journey together. Go to the NUR FSO playlist that I have on YouTube and watch all of the podcasts of Sheikh Wahid Azal, which are also archived on his channel. If you believe you can benefit the journey and the work in any way, please get in touch with either of us. And till next time we do part 20, we do Nur Alaikum and blessings of light.
Alaikum Nur.